Hi folks, I'm Michael Lovados. Torrent, this is Resident Expert. Today I'm here to talk to you about the poster boy for orphans everywhere, Batman, in 5.2 things you probably could have googled yourself. Batman's age is a bit of a mystery, as are most fictional characters. What makes it even more difficult to figure out Batman's age is the fact that characters around him will age while he remains the same. For example, you have Robin as a 12-year-old, then become a man as Nightwing, then become Batman, then go back to being Nightwing. All the while, Batman has remained exactly the same, except for the time where he was sent through time. That aside, with the new 52, everything has changed. All the characters are now being drawn a lot younger, so we can estimate that everyone is roughly 20. DC further muddled that up by releasing some prequels, Detective Comics 0 and Batman 0, which clearly show Batman being in his mid-30s. So Batman is now 35, the rest of the Justice League is in their young 20s, and that's why Wonder Woman is no longer interested in him sexually. Have you ever wondered how much you'd be worth if your parents were billionaires and you saw them murdered in an alley? I'm not saying Batman ever thought about this, but there are parallel versions of him that actually organised their deaths himself so he could speed up his inheritance. Just some food for thought. Forbes, the real company, not some weird DC made up parallel, the real legitimate company Forbes, actually looked into how much Batman was worth, and they came to a figure of about $7 billion, raising one very important question. Why does Forbes care how much money a fictional character has? And how do we tax him? Comic books can be a tricky thing, filled with landmines of incorrect facts. When it comes to how many Robins Batman has had, this is one of those times where landmines abide, and one wrong step that I could walk out of this room missing a leg because I'm going to be flamed on the internet because I made a mistake. But I assure you, I did not. You are the one that is mistaken. First, to explain this properly, I need to explain to you what canon means. Canon is anything that's considered part of the overall story. Anything that isn't included in the canon is an Elseworld story or a different timeline or something like that. So in the canon, Batman has currently had 4 Robins. He's had the first Robin, Dick Grayson, who went on to be Nightwing and then become Batman and then went back to Nightwing, that everyone was very unhappy about. Then you had Jason Todd, who was, after a fan poll, actually decided to be murdered by the Joker. So, fans were kind of mean back in the day. He later returned as my favourite character, the Red Hood, and is currently a vigilante, still part of the Bat family though. Then you had Tim Drake, who went on to become Red Robin. He did some things no one cares about because he's horribly boring. And finally you had Damian Wayne, Batman and Talia al Ghul's son, who was then killed by a cloned version of Damian Wayne who was artificially aged inside the uterus of a whale. Because comics. You may be sitting there going, what about the female Robins? What about Stephanie and Carrie? Well, unfortunately, Carrie doesn't exist because Batman has never been an 80-year-old with a tank, therefore non-canon. And Stephanie was actually retconned out of existence with the newest Flashpoint event, which created the DC New 52. While it is typically believed that Batman does not use guns, you'd be incorrect. During the Silver Age of comics, which is 1956 to 1970, approximately, Batman was often seen holding guns. If my editing man, Brendan Dando, has been on point, there's been pictures popping up just here of all the points I've been making previously, and hopefully now there's some ones with guns right here. If there's not, it's kind of awkward, and you're just going to have to take my word for it. Yeah, Batman used guns. Our last point about Batman is another one of those internet doozies, where if I get it wrong, I'm going to find out someone on the internet has fucked my mother. So let's try and avoid that. We're going to talk about the people that know that Batman is Bruce Wayne, and therefore Bruce Wayne is Batman. So you've obviously got the Bat family who know of his existence, which is Alfred, Jason, Tim, Dre, all those guys. They all know. Obviously, he works with them. The other people that know are Amanda Waller, Superman, Hugo Strange, Ra's al Ghul, and yes, it is pronounced Ra's, it's not pronounced Raz, I don't care what you saw in a movie, Talia al Ghul, Wonder Woman, and Lex Luthor. They're the people that we know that Batman and Bruce Wayne are one and the same. There's also some conjecture about the next people on these lists, but it's pretty safe to assume they do know. It's never just been said, 100% these people know. Those people are the Joker, Harley Quinn, James Gordon, and Commissioner Gordon. And for those of you who think James Gordon and Commissioner Gordon is the same person, they're not. James Gordon is Commissioner Gordon's serial killer son. So, now you know some extra information. Earlier I mentioned that we were going to do 5.2 facts about Batman, and here's the point 2. Technically, they're not 100% about Batman and more about DC as a company, but they fit well here. Batman first appeared in Detective Comics 27 in 1939. That makes Batman 75 years old. After Batman's debut, he appropriated Detective Comics as his own book. The DC in DC Comics actually stands for Detective Comics. So like many internet fans have said over the last few years, you could in fact call DC Comics Batman Comics, because they already do. So there you have it. Hopefully you've learned something about Batman. If you haven't, I bow down to your comic book knowledge superiority. Join me next time when I'm going to take you through 5 things you probably could have Googled about Game of Thrones. But don't Google it now, because that would ruin the episode. Google it after. It's called things you could have Googled. You don't need to Google it yourself. That's my job. Yeah. Figured I'd join in.
So that's the hand, right?
Encore!